I pulled the guarantor file out of my desk that Monday morning, drove down to the marina office, and signed one page that could shut my son's boat shop down by Friday. No yelling, no threats, just a quiet decision. After 40 years fixing other people's vessels, I was about to stop holding my own family together. The boat shop didn't appear out of nowhere. It didn't come from a lucky break or a clever logo on a sign by the road. It came from years of work that started long before my son ever thought about running his own place. I've worked with wood and water my entire adult life. Old boats, mostly. The kind other people give up on. Cracked ribs, soft planks, engines that hadn't turned in years. I learned early that if you rush a repair, the ocean will find the weakness. So you take your time, you replace what's rotten, you reinforce what still looks fine, because looks don't mean much once you're offshore. I spent decades doing that. One boat at a time. One joint at a time. I didn't get rich, but I got known. People knew my name at the docks. Inspectors knew my work. Harbor masters trusted my signatures. When I said a vessel was seaworthy, it meant something. That kind of reputation isn't loud. It doesn't show up on a business card, but it follows you. When Ethan came to me with the idea of opening his own shop, I didn't laugh. I didn't tell him it was a bad time or that he wasn't ready. I asked him questions. How big? Where? What kind of work? Who he thought his clients would be. He had answers. Some good, some half-formed. That's how it's supposed to be at his age. So I helped, not with speeches, with concrete things. I put up the initial money when the bank wouldn't. Not a gift, not charity. A calculated risk from a man who understood the business. I co-signed the permits when the city wanted a guarantor with experience. I stood next to him in meetings with inspectors who'd been doing this longer than he'd been alive. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. My presence did the talking. When suppliers hesitated, I made the calls. When insurance asked for history, I provided mine. When someone asked, "Who's backing this operation?" the answer wasn't his name. It was mine. The shop opened. His name went on the sign. That was right. It should have been. A man needs to stand on his own eventually. I stepped back. Let him run things. Make mistakes. Learn from the outside. It probably looked simple. A young man starting a business. A proud father cheering him on from a distance. What people didn't see was the scaffolding holding everything up. The paperwork, the guarantees, the quiet assurances that made doors open without arguments. That kind of support doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand thanks. But it's there. I kept working my own jobs, smaller ones. Repair work by the marina. I didn't hang around the shop unless Ethan asked. I didn't want to be in the way. I never believed in hovering. If you've built something right, you don't need to stand over it. For a while, it worked. The shop grew. More boats came in. Better contracts. People started associating Ethan's name with quality work. That was the goal all along. I was proud of him. Quietly. The way men like me usually are. What I didn't realize at the time was how invisible that made me. When everything runs smoothly, people forget what keeps it that way. They see the sign, not the foundation under it. They assume the structure was always solid. They don't see the hands that tightened the bolts before anyone was watching. I didn't correct that assumption. I never felt the need to. Power, real power, doesn't need to be explained. It sits in the background, it waits. And for a long time, I was content to stay there. The first time I realized something had shifted. It wasn't during an argument. It was during a celebration. The shop's opening day came on a Saturday in early fall. Clear sky, calm water. The kind of weather you hope for when you're trying to make a good first impression. I remember standing in my garage that morning, wiping my hands on a rag, deciding whether to go down early or wait until Ethan called. He didn't. Around noon, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. I figured things were busy. That was normal. First events always are. So I drove down to the marina anyway. When I got there, the place was full. Cars lined up along the road, people I recognized from the docks, suppliers, a couple of inspectors, music playing softly from inside the shop. Someone had set up a table with drinks and finger food. I stayed near the entrance for a moment, just watching. Ethan was talking to a small group near the workbench. Megan stood beside him, smiling, greeting people like she'd done this 100 times. Linda was there too, right at her side, well-dressed, confident, laughing louder than everyone else. I waited for Ethan to notice me. He didn't. At first, when he finally did, his face changed for half a second. Not surprise. Something else. Something tighter. He walked over, gave me a quick hug. The kind you give when you're already thinking about the next thing you have to do. "Dad," he said. "You made it." I nodded, looked around, took it in. I didn't see a place for myself. Before I could say anything, Megan stepped in. She smiled. Polite. Controlled. "We weren't sure you'd want to be here today," she said. "It's more business people, press, that kind of thing." I didn't answer right away. Linda chimed in from behind her. "We'll do a proper family dinner another time," she said. This is really Ethan's moment. Ethan didn't correct her. He didn't look at me. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, listening to the music, the conversations, the sound of glasses clinking. Everything sounded normal. Everything looked right, except for where I was standing. I nodded once, said, "All right." No one argued. No one stopped me. I walked back to my truck, got in, and drove home. That was the strange part. No one had raised their voice. No one had said anything cruel. There were no harsh words to replay in my head, just a clean exclusion, handled neatly, like it had been discussed ahead of time. That night, Ethan called. "Sorry, today was hectic," he said. "We'll get together soon." I said I understood. And I meant it. At least, I thought I did. But once something like that happens, you start noticing the pattern. Who's always included? Who's always asked to wait? Who's considered essential? And who's considered optional? I replayed the day in my head. Not the conversations, the silences, the way no one thought it needed explaining, the way my absence didn't disrupt anything. That was when I realized the shop had crossed a line I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just my son's business anymore. It was a place where I no longer belonged, and no one thought that was strange. After that day at the shop, things didn't explode. They just adjusted? That's what everyone called it, adjusting. The next time Linda came to town, Ethan called me the night before, not to ask how I was, not to make plans, just to let me know, "Mom's here for a few days," he said, "so we might need to move Sunday." "Move what?" I asked. "The kids were supposed to come by. We'll reschedule." I said, "Okay." That was the first time. The second time, there wasn't even a call. Megan sent a text. Short, polite. "Sorry. Plans changed. Linda wants some time with the kids." I put the phone face down on the table and finished my coffee. By the third time, it became routine. Whenever Linda arrived, my name quietly disappeared from the schedule. Dinner plans shifted, visits shortened, calls delayed, always with an explanation that sounded reasonable on its own. "She doesn't come often. She gets sensitive. It's just easier this way." No one ever said I couldn't see my grandchildren. They just made sure there was never a good time. And every time, I stepped back. I told myself it was temporary. that it wasn't worth making things awkward, that I didn't want to be the reason for tension in Ethan's marriage. That was the word they used most. Tension. As if respect and tension were opposite ends of the same rope. I noticed something else, too. Whenever plans changed because of Linda, the house felt calmer afterward. Megan seemed relieved. Ethan sounded lighter on the phone. The problem had been handled, just not by the person causing it. It was always handled by the person least likely to complain. Me? I didn't argue. I didn't push. I didn't remind anyone how much time I'd already given, or how little I was asking for. I became flexible. And flexibility, I learned, has a cost. Because the more I adjusted, the more everyone else stopped adjusting at all. My availability became assumed. My absence became acceptable. There's a strange math that happens in families like this. The difficult person sets the rules. The accommodating person pays the price. No one sits down and decides it. It just happens. Quietly, efficiently, like water finding the lowest point. One afternoon, I was supposed to take Lily down to the docks to show her how to tie a bowline. She'd been asking for weeks. I'd set the rope out on the bench the night before so I wouldn't forget. That morning, Megan called. Linda wants to take the kids shopping. She said, she won't be here long. I looked at the rope, still coiled, untouched. I said, that's fine, and I meant it. But something in me started keeping track, not out of spite, out of clarity. I began to see the pattern for what it was, not a series of small inconveniences, but a system, a way of distributing discomfort, so that it landed on the person most willing to absorb it. Peace was being maintained, just not for everyone. And the longer it went on, the clearer it became that my willingness to step aside was being mistaken for my willingness to be erased. No one was trying to hurt me. That was the part that made it harder to talk about. They were just choosing the path of least resistance, and I was the least resistant thing in the room. I realized something else, too. Every time I swallowed my place to keep things smooth, I was teaching Ethan something. Teaching him that discomfort should always be redirected downward. That the loudest person gets accommodated, that the quiet one will understand, and worse than that. I was teaching the kids the same lesson. They were watching who showed up. They were watching who got postponed. They were watching who mattered when things got inconvenient. I never raised my voice about it. I never demanded an explanation. I just stood where I was placed, until one day, standing there started to feel like agreeing. And that was the part I couldn't live with. Because families aren't supposed to work like that. They aren't supposed to run on fear of one person's reaction. They aren't supposed to survive by quietly sacrificing the same person over and over again. Harmony that depends on one person disappearing isn't harmony. It's a transaction. And I had been paying into it for a long time, a week after Linda left. Ethan asked if I could come by the shop. Not for a meeting, not for business. He said the kids were there. Lily wanted to show me something. So I went. It was late afternoon. The kind of hour where the light turns soft and the wind off the water gets colder. I brought a bag of orange slices and a little wooden keychain I'd carved the night before. Nothing fancy, just something small. When I walked in, Noah ran up first, arms out, full speed. He nearly knocked my knees. Lily came behind him, slower, holding something in both hands like it might break if she breathed wrong. Ethan was standing by the counter, watching us. He looked tired. The shop had that look too. Tools out, dust on the floor, a day of work that didn't quite end clean. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Hey," I said back. Lily waited until Noah let go of me. Then she stepped forward and held out what she'd been carrying. It was a paper boat, not just folded paper, a paper boat with careful creases, a little mast, A tiny sail she'd drawn on in blue marker. On one side, she'd written Grandpa in uneven block letters. On the other, she'd drawn a stick figure with a hat, standing on a dock. I took it gently, like it was something fragile and real. "This is for you," she said. I nodded. Didn't say much. I didn't trust my voice to come out the way I wanted it to. I turned it over once, looked at the drawings, the crooked lines, the little details she'd thought were important. Ethan cleared his throat. "She made it last weekend," he said. I looked up. "Last weekend?" He nodded. "When Mom was here." I waited. He shifted his weight like he was trying to decide whether to keep talking. "She asked why you didn't come over." He said. I didn't ask what he told her. I already knew. Parents always reach for the same answer when they don't want to admit the truth. They say you were busy. They say it was complicated. They say next time. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "She kept asking." He said, not in a dramatic way, just straightforward, like kids are. I stayed quiet. She said, "Grandpa always comes when he says he will." And then she asked, "Did he do something wrong?" He looked down at the floor when he said it. I felt my fingers tighten around the paper boat without meaning to. Then I loosened them, carefully, like I was handling a splinter. Lily watched my face, trying to read it the way children do, like they can tell when something changes even if they don't have words for it yet. I crouched down so I was at her level. "It's beautiful," I said. "You did a good job." She smiled, just a quick little smile. Then she reached out and touched the edge of the sail, as if she was making sure it was still there. That's when it hit me. I thought I was dealing with Linda. I thought I was dealing with Megan's need to keep her mother happy. I thought I was trying to teach Ethan something about boundaries, about respect, about not letting one person run the whole room. But the people paying the real price weren't the adults. It was the kids. Because kids don't understand politics. They don't understand keeping the peace. They don't understand the quiet negotiations adults make when they're afraid of conflict. They understand presence. They understand who shows up and who doesn't. And when someone disappears without explanation, they don't assume it's complicated. They assume it's them. They assume they weren't worth the trouble. Or they assume the person who didn't show up didn't want to. And once that lesson takes root, it doesn't come out easily. I stood up slowly, still holding the paper boat. Ethan was watching me now. Really watching. Like he could see something shifting behind my eyes, even though I wasn't saying anything. I didn't know she asked that. I said, "I didn't know what to say." He replied. And there it was. Not the fight I'd been expecting. Not anger. Not yelling. Just a small, quiet truth sitting between us. I looked at Lily again, at Noah, at the way they hovered near me like I was a safe place they were trying not to lose. I realized then that every time I stepped aside to make things easier for the adults, I was making something harder for the children. And that was the part I couldn't accept anymore. Because if my grandchildren grew up learning that family is optional, that love gets postponed, that the people who are easy can be pushed out of the room, then I wasn't just being patient. I was helping build the wrong kind of foundation. Ethan came by my place 2 nights later. No warning, just a knock after dinner. I opened the door and saw him standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders slightly forward, like he wasn't sure he deserved to be let in. I stepped aside, and he walked in. We didn't sit right away. He stood near the window, looking out toward the water. I stayed by the table, drying my hands on a towel that didn't need drying. After a long moment, he said, "I'm sorry. Dad, he didn't dress it up. No explanations. No blaming anyone else, just that I should have handled things differently, he said. I should have spoken up sooner. I nodded. That was all. He waited, maybe expecting more. Forgiveness, reassurance, something to release the tension. I didn't give him that. Not because I was angry, but because I was listening. I know I've said this before, he continued. And I know it hasn't stuck. But I mean it this time. I'll fix it, I promise. There it was. The word everyone reaches for when they don't yet know how to change the situation. Promise. I walked over to the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee, even though it was late. Habit. Some conversations deserve a table and something warm between you. I handed him a mug. He took it with both hands. I didn't interrupt him. I let the silence do its work. I don't want you feeling pushed out, he said. I don't want the kids thinking that's okay. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. I messed up. That part mattered, but not enough. Because I'd been a father long enough to know something most people don't like to admit. A sincere apology doesn't stop a pattern. It pauses it. I sat down across from him. I believe you mean it, I said. I really do. His shoulders relaxed a little. But meaning it isn't the same as making it hold. He frowned slightly. Not defensive. Just confused. I've worked on boats my whole life, I continued. And there's one thing they all have in common. They don't fail because someone wanted them to fail. They fail because someone trusted a weak joint to behave better next time. He didn't say anything. When water starts finding the same crack over and over, I said, you don't lecture the water. You don't promise it'll stop. You change the structure. I took a sip of coffee. You've promised me before, I said. And every time Linda showed up, the promise disappeared. Not because you're a bad man, but because the system stayed the same. He looked down at his hands. I'm tired. Dad, he said quietly. I'm always trying to keep everyone okay. I nodded again. I know. I said, that's why this keeps happening. He looked up, confused now. When everything depends on your goodwill, I said, the strongest pressure always wins. Not the fairest one, the loudest one. He leaned back in his chair, ran a hand through his hair. So what do you want me to do? He asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was an honest question. I didn't answer right away. I thought about all the times I'd wanted to believe words were enough. All the times I'd accepted reassurance because it felt kinder than asking for something concrete. I don't need another promise, I said finally. He stiffened slightly. I need a system. He waited. I need to know that my place in this family doesn't depend on how calm Linda feels that week. I said, I need to know the kids don't lose me every time someone gets uncomfortable. I set my mug down. That means schedules that don't change quietly, rules that apply even when it's inconvenient, boundaries that don't rely on you being brave in the moment. He exhaled slowly. That sounds formal, he said. It is, I replied, because informal is what got us here. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. I never thought of it like that, he said. I always figured if I just tried harder. That's the problem, I said gently. Respect that depends on effort isn't respect. It's endurance. I stood up and started clearing the mugs. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I said. I'm asking you to stop making the quiet people pay for the peace. He watched me move around the kitchen like he used to when he was a kid. Like he was trying to recognize something familiar that had shifted slightly out of reach. I want to do this right, he said. I know, I replied, and I want to believe you. I turned back to him. But belief isn't enough anymore, because I'd learned something the hard way. Boundaries that only exist in conversation disappear the moment pressure enters the room. If it matters, it needs to live somewhere stronger than intention. It needs to live in structure. That was the night I stopped waiting for words to protect what mattered, and started preparing to protect it myself. I didn't do anything right away. That's the part people don't expect. They think moments like that lead straight to ultimatums, raised voices, threats, lines in the sand. That's not how I work. I waited until the house was quiet again, until the feelings settled enough that I could think clearly. Then I went back to the habits that had kept me alive in business for decades. I pulled out the folders, not memories, not texts, paper, permits, insurance certificates, the original guarantor forms from when the shop was first approved. I laid them out on the table the same way I used to lay out plans before cutting wood, slow, methodical. What I was looking for wasn't leverage, it was reality. And the reality was simple. The shop didn't just run on Ethan's effort. It ran on approvals that were tied to my name, coverage that existed because I had signed for it, a guarantor clause that hadn't been revisited since the day we opened the doors. I hadn't hidden that from him. I just hadn't waved it around, because power that needs to be announced is already weak. I made a few calls, short ones, not dramatic. The insurance agent confirmed what I already knew. Without my backing, the policy would need to be rewritten. That would take time. The licensing office told me the same thing. Change in guarantor meant review. Review meant pause. No anger, no accusations, just process. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I drove down to the marina early. Before the shop opened, I didn't go inside. I sat in my truck for a while, watching the water move against the pilings. Boats don't fight the tide. They work with it, or they break. When Ethan arrived, I stepped out. He looked surprised to see me, but not uneasy. Not yet. We stood next to his truck, the smell of salt and fuel in the air, gulls overhead. I need to let you know something. I said. I kept my voice even, the way I used to when explaining a delay to a client. I'm withdrawing my guarantor status. I said, effective immediately. He stared at me. You're... What, he asked. I'm stepping back from the paperwork. I said, insurance, licensing, all of it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You're shutting us down, he said finally. I shook my head. No, I said. The system is... That's when he understood this wasn't a threat. There was nothing to argue with, no insult to respond to, no emotion to deflect, just consequences. This is legal, I continued. It's clean, no penalties, no lawsuits, just a pause until things are restructured. He ran a hand through his hair, the same way he always did when something slipped out of his control. Why didn't you just tell me it had come to this? He asked. I looked at him. I did. I said, months ago. Just not in words. He didn't answer, because part of him already knew. People think conflict has only two paths. You either swallow it and let it rot, or you explode and burn everything down. They never talk about the third path, the one where you stop arguing about feelings and start dealing with systems, where you don't punish anyone, but you also don't protect a structure that's doing harm. That's what I chose. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I wanted to end the pattern. When your place in a family depends on someone else's mood, that's not love. That's instability. And instability is dangerous. By noon, the call started. Megan, panicked, asking what was happening. Linda, furious, demanding explanations. I didn't answer either of them, because this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a reset. Ethan came by that evening, not to argue, to listen. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse me of betrayal. He just sat there, quiet, finally feeling the weight of a system he hadn't wanted to see. "You planned this," he said. I nodded. I prepared for it. I corrected. There's a difference. I wasn't taking anything from him. I was removing myself from being quietly taken for granted. This wasn't revenge, it was alignment. Because justice in families doesn't come from who cries harder or who shouts longest. It comes from understanding how things actually work and having the courage to change that when it stops being fair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't even demand anything. I just stopped holding together a structure that had learned to lean on me while pushing me out. And once I did that, the truth surfaced fast, not because I exposed it, but because systems don't lie. They reveal. The shop went quiet faster than anyone expected. Not overnight, but fast enough that people felt it. Orders were paused. A couple of boats sat half-finished on their stands. Tools stayed where they were at the end of the day, instead of being put back. That kind of quiet carries weight. It tells you something has shifted, even if no one says it out loud. Megan called first. Her voice was tight, controlled. The way people sound when they're trying not to panic. "What's happening?" she asked. "Ethan says things are on hold." I told her the same thing I'd told Ethan. Nothing dramatic, nothing personal, just that the shop couldn't operate under the same structure anymore. She asked if this was about her mother. I didn't answer that question, because this wasn't about blame. It was about consequences. Linda didn't call. She showed up. She came to the house 2 days later, unannounced, walked straight past me like I wasn't standing in my own doorway, and went looking for Ethan. She found him in the kitchen. I stayed in the other room. I didn't need to hear every word to know how it went. Her voice rose, sharp, certain. She spoke like someone who had never been told no and didn't plan on starting now. "This is ridiculous. You're letting him control you. Family doesn't do this to each other. I heard a chair scrape back, a cabinet close harder than necessary." Then Ethan spoke. Not loud, but steady. "This didn't come out of nowhere," he said. There was a pause after that. The kind that means the room is paying attention. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't even argue. Ethan continued. He stepped back. "That's it." Linda laughed. A short sound. Dismissive. "So you're choosing him now?" she asked. That's when Ethan said something I hadn't heard him say before. "I'm choosing my family," he said. "Not you. Not him. My family." Silence followed. Real silence. The kind that only happens when someone realizes their usual pressure isn't working. Megan came to sit with me later that evening. She didn't apologize. Not yet. She just sat down across from me at the table and folded her hands together. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. I nodded. "It always goes this far," I replied. "It just doesn't always get noticed." She looked tired, older than she had a month ago. "My mom says you're forcing us to choose," she said. I shook my head. "No." I said, "I stopped choosing for you. That landed, because that was the truth. For years, I'd been the soft surface everyone leaned on. The one who adjusted, the one who made room, the one who disappeared quietly when it made things easier. And because I never made noise, everyone assumed I'd always be there to absorb the weight." The shop closing cracked that illusion. Ethan felt it first. Not as anger, as responsibility. He started seeing what it meant to run something where every decision has a ripple, where avoiding conflict doesn't make it disappear, it just sends the cost somewhere else. Linda tried one more time. She called Ethan late one night. I wasn't in the room, but I heard his side of the conversation through the wall. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue details. He just said, "This is how it's going to be." And when she pushed, he said. If that doesn't work for you, we'll deal with that too. That was the moment. Not when the shop paused, not when the paperwork shifted, but when Ethan stopped bracing himself for her reaction and started standing inside his own decision. Crises do that. They strip away the habits we hide behind and show us what we actually value when there's a cost attached. For the first time, Ethan wasn't choosing the easiest path. He was choosing the right one, and that told me everything I needed to know. Because when power shifts, it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet. It's the moment someone realizes they don't need permission anymore. And once that happens, nothing ever goes back to the way it was. The conversation didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a big family meeting, no raised voices, no declarations. It happened in pieces. The first part was a call from Ethan. Short, direct. We need to talk, he said. Not defensive. Not panicked, just steady. That was new. I went over that evening. The kids were already in bed. The house was quiet in the way it gets after a long day where everyone's been carrying more than usual. Megan was there too, sitting at the table. Papers stacked neatly in front of her like she was trying to make sense of something by organizing it. No one offered coffee? That told me everything. Ethan didn't pace. He didn't avoid eye contact. He sat down across from me and took a breath. We can't go back to how things were, he said. I nodded. I know. I replied. Megan spoke next. We've been talking, she said. About the kids, about schedules, about what keeps happening every time my mom visits. She didn't say her mother's name. She didn't have to. We don't want them growing up thinking people just disappear when things get uncomfortable, she added. That landed heavier than any apology. They slid a piece of paper toward me. It wasn't a contract, just a handwritten schedule. Sunday afternoons, standing dinner every other week, holidays planned in advance, no last-minute changes, no conditional invitations, and one line at the bottom, written carefully, like it mattered. If plans change, they change for everyone. I read it slowly, not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted to be sure this wasn't a gesture. This includes when your mom visits, I asked. Ethan answered without hesitation. Yes. That was the moment things actually shifted, not when the shop closed, not when the paperwork moved, but when he said that out loud and didn't soften it. Megan swallowed. She won't like it, she said. I know, Ethan replied, and he didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at his wife. That mattered. We talked through the rest like adults, not emotional, practical, what the expectations were, what would happen if boundaries were ignored, what wasn't up for debate anymore. I didn't ask for control, I asked for consistency. A week later, I reinstated the guarantor paperwork. No announcement, no victory lap, just another form signed, another system put back in place, this time with clearer rules underneath it. Ethan thanked me. Quietly. I told him the same thing I'd told him when we first opened the shop. This isn't a favor, I said. It's a responsibility. Linda didn't take it well. She pushed. She tested. She tried to find the old cracks. But something had changed. When she showed up unannounced, Megan didn't scramble. When she tried to rearrange plans, Ethan didn't explain. He just said, "That doesn't work for us." And then he stopped talking. No justifications, no apologies, just the boundary. The kids noticed before anyone else did. They always do. Lily stopped asking whether I was coming. She just asked what time. Noah started leaving his shoes by the door on Sundays like it was a given. Presence became normal again, not something negotiated. That's when I understood what respect actually looks like. It doesn't come from history. It doesn't come from titles or bloodlines. It comes from people choosing each other when there's pressure not to. From parents protecting the space their children grow up in. From adults being willing to disappoint the loudest voice in the room to do what's right. I didn't win anything. That was never the point. What changed wasn't who had power. It was how power was used. Quietly. Clearly. Without drama. The rules didn't make us closer overnight. They made us stable. And sometimes, that's what real care looks like. Not grand gestures, just a system that finally stops letting the wrong people pay the price. I didn't go back to the shop, not because I was banned, not because Ethan asked me to stay away, because I'd already made my point, and I wasn't interested in hovering around like an unpaid security guard. That place was his. It needed to feel like his. So I stayed home for a while. I fixed things that didn't need fixing. A hinge, a loose step, a stubborn drawer. Old habits. Then one morning, I drove down to the little bend in the road where the bay opens up and the water turns calm. There was a small dock there, nothing fancy. Just weathered planks, a couple of cleats, and enough room to tie up a skiff. It had been for sale for months. I'd seen the sign every time I passed it. That day, I pulled over. I called the number. 2 weeks later, I had a key, no announcement, no grand plan, just a small piece of water that belonged to nobody else's mood. I cleaned it up the same way I cleaned up everything I ever cared about, slowly, boards replaced one at a time. A handrail tightened. A light hung on the post so you could see where you were stepping after sunset. I didn't put my name on anything. I didn't need to. The first time Ethan brought the kids over. Noah ran ahead like he already owned the place. Lily followed behind. Careful, holding the railing with both hands. Megan stood back on the gravel and watched. Ethan didn't say much. He just looked at the water, then at me. Like he finally understood what I'd been trying to do the whole time. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to make sure there was still a place for us to stand. Because when families start playing these quiet power games, people think the loud person is the powerful one, the one who can ruin a dinner, the one who can sour a holiday, the one who can make everyone tense up just by walking in the door. But that isn't real power. Real power is being able to stay calm and still change the outcome. It's knowing what you built. It's knowing what you signed. It's knowing what you're responsible for and what you're not. Linda didn't like the new rules. She tried pushing them. She tried calling Megan directly, like she used to. Megan stopped picking up. She started texting back instead. Short answers, clear answers. Ethan backed her up. Every time. And eventually, Linda learned what most controlling people learn when the system changes. You can't intimidate a boundary that's written down and enforced. You can only accept it or walk away from it. Our family wasn't perfect after that. We still had awkward moments. We still had silences that lasted a little too long. But the pattern broke. And that matters. Because patterns are what shape kids. Not speeches, not explanations. Patterns. Now, when it's Sunday, the kids don't ask. Are we allowed to go see Grandpa? They just grab their shoes, they run down to the dock, they toss breadcrumbs for the birds and argue about whose turn it is to hold the rope. And I sit on that bench I built with my own hands and watch them. That's the part people miss when they think this story is about money or leverage. The paperwork was never the goal. It was just the tool. The goal was dignity. The goal was stability. The goal was making sure the people I love aren't treated like optional extras in their own family. So if you're sitting there right now, biting your tongue for the 100th time, telling yourself you're keeping the peace, ask yourself who's paying for that peace. Because you don't have to scream to be respected. You have to know where you stand, and you have to know what the rules are.